There are many different cultures around the world, and they all have different means of communication. Because of this, each individual culture affects communication in different ways. Cultures affect the way we behave and see ourselves, nonverbal communication with others, and the way we understand and communicate with others. In these ways, we need to grow awareness about how culture affects the way we see ourselves, communicate nonverbally, and the way we understand and communicate with others. Within every culture, there are certain norms and expectations that dictate how we behave and view ourselves within that culture. Culture affects the way we behave and see ourselves is one of many ways culture affects communication. Teenage girls living in America go back to school shopping every year around August. Due to the culture in America, many girls do not buy the clothes they want, but buy what most people are buying, as well as buying clothes that comply with their school's dress code. According to the National Center for Education Statistics, 53% of schools have required dress codes, and another 21% of schools have required uniforms. Dress codes and uniforms was an attempt to promote safety in school buildings. However, many people argue that with dress code comes discrimination. This is because girls have more rules to follow in their dress code than the boy counterparts they go to school with. Many dress codes prohibit girls from wearing thin-strapped clothing, short skirts and shorts, and revealing tops, whereas boys normally cannot wear hats or hoodies with the hoods pulled up. Some schools around the country have dress codes but do not strictly enforce them. Culture styles also help link a person's nonverbal communication to their cultural background. Culture affects the way we nonverbally communicate with others is yet another way culture affects communication. Many times, nonverbal communication is linked to a person's background and culture. Nonverbal cues vary by culture, and if we do not understand a person's culture, we could offend them. According to Maharabia, 93% of meaning is conveyed through nonverbal communication channels. Body language makes up the largest part of our nonverbal communication. For example, according to Charlene Solomon, in Japan, smiling is a way to show respect or hide true feelings. However, in Japan, they gather nonverbal cues from a person's eyes rather than a person's mouth, so it is easier for people living in the Japanese culture to determine if it is real or fake. According to Wood and Adler, another example is many North Americans believe that time is money and expect things to start and end on time, where other cultures have a relaxed attitude and a different sense of time. Facial expressions such as smiling and crying are natural in most cultures. While it is important to understand a culture's nonverbal communication cues, it is also important to understand a culture's verbal communication style. Culture affects the way we understand and communicate with others is another way culture affects communication. Cultures guide the use of language. Communication is the means of human interaction through which cultural characteristics are shared. Language is also used to express and reinforce culture and those living in the culture. According to the textbook Invitation to Human Communication, some cultures use feminine nouns where other cultures use masculine nouns for the same word. For example, the word bridge in German is Brück, a feminine noun. When used to provide three words that described a bridge shown in a photograph, German speakers most often use words such as elegant, fragile, and beautiful. In Spanish, the word for bridge is puente, a masculine noun. When Spanish speakers were asked the same question, they responded that the bridge appeared strong, dangerous, and big. In cross-cultural situations, including verbal and nonverbal communication, are intensified as different cultures communicate differently. The verbal communication styles are shaped and reshaped by a culture's values, worldviews, norms, and thinking styles of the specific cultural group that they belong to. Cultures affect many things in and around communication, including the way we behave and see ourselves as people, affects the way we understand other people's nonverbal communication, and affects the way we understand and communicate with others. Culture affects many different aspects of communication, and although these are just a few, there are many more ways that culture affects communication in our everyday lives. So next time you're communicating with someone with a different cultural background, remember that their culture has an effect on their communication style.